In the small and quiet town of Huánuco, Peru, something weird had been happening. For the last 4 years, more than 60 people had been disappearing from the area, simply seeming to vanish into thin air after walking home from work, mostly at night. In November 2009, after months of expectancy and pressure, Peruvian police released a statement to the public. They had finally solved the case. It turns out they had dismantled an entire criminal operation, which was all based on the selling of real human fat. For ritualistic, experimental, and cosmetic purposes? The story I'm about to share with you is without any doubt one of the most bizarre and unsettling I have ever come across. But after spending a little too much time on the web, I am finally able to reveal to you the haunting tale of the Pishtacos. So get ready, because what you're about to see is as chilling as it is unforgettable. On the midnight of August 12, 2008, a young farmer called Abel Matos was walking home after a long day of work. His route took him through a large valley following a dirt road that hardly anyone used, especially at that time of the night. He was whistling a tune, unaware it would be the last melody to ever leave his lips. Later, after a proper investigation, it was discovered that Abel had been killed by a handmade device called the wincha. Crafted from wood, it worked almost like a measuring tape, releasing a hidden blade that instantly decapitated him. Shockingly, the autopsy revealed something else. Abel had managed to walk a few meters more, even without his head. The next day, his family quickly reported his disappearance. Along with Abel, there were already dozens of people who seemed to vanish out of nowhere in Huánuco. Many of them weren't even reported missing. But the number had grown so much that the reports could no longer be ignored. Police officers were sent to the town to carry out the investigation. The first thing they did was talk to the locals, and they immediately noticed something very peculiar. Look, in many South American towns, it's pretty common to believe in legends and myths. And trust me, there's plenty to choose from. Huánuco was no exception. In fact, here people particularly believe in one specific story. The Pishtacos are a Peruvian legend. These thieves were known for coming to small towns, kidnapping and chopping people into pieces, then hanging their bodies on hooks to collect their human fat. Turns out the locals believed in this story and thought the disappearances were due to the Pishtacos. And well, they weren't too far from the truth. Some weeks passed, and the police had managed to make some progress. They had found human remains in the large vacant lots in the area. Still, they couldn't seem to catch any definitive clue, until by sheer chance they intercepted a strange bus. They thought it would be just an unusual drug shipment. And yes, there were drugs, as usual. But there were also another thing. Dozens of bottles filled with a strange yellow liquid were found inside the truck. Officers, clearly confused, couldn't tell what the substance was, but it was thick and smelled awful. A few days later, when the results came back, there were no words to say. Everyone was shocked. How had they managed to collect so many liters of human fat? It was clearly a crime, and there was a high chance it was connected to the disappearances. The police got to work, and it wasn't hard to find the person responsible for the shipment. His name? Marcos Beramendi. He was immediately arrested, and when questioned, he just gave the police a location: a small basement in a house on the outskirts of Huánuco. As soon as they arrived, the foul smell was noticeable from meters away, and it got worse with every step they took. When they opened the basement, a chill ran down their spines. Dozens of dismembered bodies, hanging from hooks, dripping fat, and being collected in buckets. That was their operation base, the real Pishtacos hideout.
Que se dedican a este tipo de actividad criminal, ¿cómo pueden llegar a lograr matar a las personas, descuartizarlas con la única finalidad pues de que puedan ellos obtener pingües ganancias por la venta de la grasa humana?
Elmer II Castillejos, Marcos Beramendi, Hilario Cudeña Simón, and Eneina Stella were immediately arrested. Soon, the interrogation process began, and the details started coming to light. Their victims followed them until they were alone and killed them using various methods, including the wincha. Once the victim was dead, they transported the body to the basement, where they proceeded to dismember it and hang the pieces near the heat of candles. This process allowed them to collect their fat, which they later sold. After completing this gruesome operation, they sold the extracted fat in Lima to German or Italian exporters for up to $15,000 per liter. The product was then shipped to Europe to be used in high-end cosmetics or other materials. In which type of cosmetics the fat was used remains unknown. Veramendi never wanted to give a deep explanation on this topic. You would think that would be the end of it. The culprits were arrested, and the case became one of the many bizarre criminal stories around the world. But what if I told you the suspects were never actually convicted? That's right, none of the four were ever convicted. The charges were never proven, and they were released months later. To this day, their whereabouts remain unknown. But how is that even possible? I mean, Veramendi himself confessed, didn't he? Well, sort of. At first, he did, but upon his release, he made a rather curious statement. According to him, the entire thing was fake. He claimed he was forced to confess and that none of those events ever happened. One of the most popular theories suggests that this was all orchestrated by the Peruvian government as a distraction during a time of significant public unrest. By focusing attention on this disturbing case, they could divert people's frustration elsewhere. Many agree with this claim, but others, like Velázquez's Ken, strongly deny it was a fabrication. Another key point worth mentioning is that human fat really serves little purpose, with no real interest in its use for cosmetics. This was all confirmed by international agencies shortly after the events. I quote, "Aside from being horrific acts, human fat has no cosmetic value. Even trying to think like a criminal, it would be absurd to kill to obtain human fat. After cosmetic surgeries, for example, fat is simply discarded. It has no market value," said María del Valdés, Director General of the Spanish Association of Perfumery and Cosmetics. So what do you think happened? At the end, you are free to believe what you want. Since 2009 there have been no updates, no conclusions were reached, and no one was convicted. But one thing is certain, the tapes are there. Abel Matos was real, and he disappeared, just like 60 other people.